Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good few times before. I've had some really nice beers from them over the last couple of years, but the one that we're going to have a look at today is a slightly altered version of a beer that we tried from them last month, and I was very impressed with that beer last month actually. So I have to say I'm very, very curious to see how this one turns out. So hopefully it's another good beer. Fingers crossed it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review we are going to head to Helsingborg in the northwestern corner of Skåne, a very beautiful city that I would recommend that you check out if you visit here, and a bit to the north of me here in Lund of course too. And we're going to have a look at another beer from Benchwarmers Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Italian Pilsner. It comes in at 4.2% ABV, and this one is Citra dry hopped. So like I said, this is basically a slightly altered version of their Pilsner that they released last month, which was a straight up 4.2%er, and I thought that one was really very good actually. But this beer was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for August of 2021. And when I saw that they were releasing an Italian Pilsner, I thought, you know, I have to have a go at this. An Italian Pilsner essentially is a slightly more hoppy version of a kind of regular Pilsner, in fact, and this style is getting a little bit more popular in recent times. In fact, there's more and more craft breweries having a go at these, and it's also nice to see that more and more breweries are having a go at brewing lagers, having focused on IPAs and pale ales for such a long time. But as I say, if you get the chance to try a lager beer from these guys, a Pilsner, I think you will enjoy it. I thought the last one was very, very nicely done. But let's crack on with this review then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Benchwarmers Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Benchwarmers Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Benchwarmers Brewing, as I've told you before, is owned by two childhood friends. This is Magnus Svensson and Anders Nilsson. So Magnus was an owning partner in Brewdog's operations in Sweden, and he comes from a background in customer service, whereas Anders had worked in various jobs, but he spent a long time working for an online web store. But both of these guys are childhood friends from Helsingborg, and so they set up the company together back in 2016. But they've got their own brewery in Rå, which is in the southern part of Helsingborg. I think it's considered a separate town actually, but yeah, it's in Rå to the south of Helsingborg. And during the summer they were opening up as a brew pub with a grill for burgers and things like that. But apparently they named the brewery Benchwarmers because they say they spent a bit too much time sitting on benches drinking beer together. But recently they opened up their tap room on Helsingborgsgalen, which is right next to the water. You can go and check out my out and about video that I filmed up there quite recently, and you can see what it's like. But they do some pretty awesome pizza there, and you will find some Benchwarmers beer there that you won't find through Systembolaget and things. So it is definitely worth checking out, and the prices are quite reasonable as well. But as of August 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 130 different kinds of beer. They do some sour beers, they do quite a few different kinds of IPAs and things like that, and recently they've been brewing a few lagers and things like that too. So yeah, interesting stuff I have to say. I wonder if we'll see a few more dark beers from them at some point in the future, because that isn't something I've seen from them actually so far, as I can remember, are, you know, like imperial stouts and things like that. So hopefully that's something that they can add on in the fairly near future actually. But yeah, that's, as I say, all I can tell you about Benchwarmers Brewing Company for the moment. Still a relatively new company, but they seem to be going from strength to strength. So yeah, always cool to see the Skånsk breweries Doing it really well here. But yeah, that's all I can tell you. Like I said, if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork on this before we open it up, as you can see, it is quite similar to what we had with the regular Pilsner last month, so very nicely presented, quite classic actually. There you can see the Italian hand at the bottom doing its thing, that did give me a smile, and there you can see the red, green and blue for Italy and the Benchwarmers Brewing Company symbol there. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. I think I paid 30 Swedish kronor for this, that seems to stick in my mind, so that translates to €3, about £2.50, maybe a little bit more sterling, and then somewhere in the region of like $3.50, $3.75 American, depending on the exchange rate. You can see the can is sweating a little bit because of the glorious heat that we're enjoying here over the course of the Swedish summer. But yeah, lovely gold top can on this one, so I think it looks very, very nice. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. A 4.2% Italian style Pilsner, Citra dry hopped. I think it should turn out to be very nice. The original one, of course, was using Czech Sats hops, so I'm guessing that this one will be quite similar to that actually, and it'll just be kind of Citra that's been added on in the dry hopping stage. Either that or they will have upped the bitterness of the beer slightly. But yeah, if you want to try a typical Italian Pilsner, then I would recommend the Tipo Pils from Birrificio Italiano. Beautiful beer, that one that you really need to get a hold of if you get the chance. But yeah, there we go, there is our pour. So oh well, this is certainly more hazy than this is certainly a bit more hazy than the one we had last month was actually. But yeah, interesting. So before the head disappears on this one, you can see that the beer has poured with about 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head. That's fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer now, but I think it's going to leave a nice, slightly thicker foamy ring around the edge of the glass. But there's 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there too, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it looks very, very nice. So on top, as if you put the light through this beer, it actually looks very much like a kind of pale ale or something like this, or you know, an unfiltered kind of Helles lager or a Czech Svetli, it would be something like that. So yeah, this is quite interesting. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you'll get a darker colour of beer. But obviously with this beer, it's using mainly lighter coloured malt. And any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer will also affect the colour as well. But obviously those 2 factors come more into play when we're talking about sour beers. So that is worth bearing in mind. But appearance-wise, as we say, this one is quite hazy. To me, that would indicate that it's unfiltered, which is usually a good thing with lager beers. I do like unfiltered lagers. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this translates into the flavour itself actually. But in terms of appearance, it certainly does look a little bit more like a kind of New England pale ale. So you can see the colour of this one is a lovely kind of bright yellow mango juice type colour. That's how I would certainly describe this one, or kind of akin to the bright yellows that you'll get from the Czech Svetli lager or the you know, some of the unfiltered Munich Helles beers. So just to give you a brief rundown on lager beer. So the definition of a lager beer is a cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeast. The yeast fermentation takes place between 8 and 12 degrees Celsius. Ales, of course, ferment at a little bit of a higher temperature than that. You know, 15 to 18 degrees normally, and they use top fermenting yeasts. There's many different kinds of lagers, of course. The Pilsner is only one type of lager, but the Pilsner originated in the Czech city of Pilsen, or Pils as the Germans would call it. So the German name, which is more common for this style of beer, is Pilsner. The Czechs would call it Pilsen after the city. But yeah, the style was developed way back in, I want to say, the 1840s by a Bavarian brewer who was not a very nice man apparently. He was thrown out of Pilsen a few years afterwards. But yeah, the style has become the most popular the most popular style of beer in the world in terms of consumption, from what we all know. But yeah, the Italian style Pilsner is a fairly new phenomenon, if you like, and it's basically just a slightly more hoppy and kind of fruity version normally of that original Czech style, if you like. And remember, the German names with these beers come about because at that time, back in the 1840s, the Czech Republic was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and in that area, I want to say that's not Moravia, that's Bohemia, sorry, yeah, Bohemia. In Bohemia, there was a mixture of ethnic Czechs and ethnic Germans. They used to live together quite well, from what I understand. But of course, things changed when two regimes came about: the Nazi regime and the communist regimes later. But yeah, it's all good now, as we say. But that is a basic rundown of the history of the Pilsner and the and as we say the lager beers generally. But yeah, this one certainly looks like a nice kind of hazy, unfiltered lager beer. We've covered the appearance of this one, I think, as much as we need to. Let's take a look at the aroma and just see how we go. But yeah, aroma-wise, it really does smell a little bit more like a pale ale. To be honest with you, that's just my first impression of it. It really comes across as more of a pale ale. So yeah, the malty backbone of this one, as we say, you get a big, for me, there's quite a big soft white bready character to this one, which I do like. The beer does smell nice, don't get me wrong on that, but it does certainly smell a little bit more like a pale ale. So there's a lovely kind of smooth white bready pale ale note to this one. You do get a few bits of kind of bread crust in there as well, but you can smell that typical kind of wet white bready character that you'll get from these from Pilsner malt. Actually, I always find that Pilsner malt gives you this very nice kind of slightly wet white bready character. You can also smell a little bit of the kind of crispness out of it too. Pilsner malt, as I've mentioned many a time, is quite dry, and it gives you a little. It's a bit annoying to kind of describe actually when it comes to aromas, because it's more about the vibe that it gives you. It gives you this really kind of crisp, sort of dry character, in fact. But yeah, how do you say, the kind of the sort of dryness, the sort of crispness that you get out of the malty side of this beer, I think is very, very nice. But sitting on top of that, you get a little bit more of a kind of oily, biscuity note to it. You can certainly smell a little bit of the kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity type qualities that come out of this beer. So I really like how I do really like how this goes about its business in that sense. Like I say, the sort of breadiness that you get out of this beer does give the impression of a little bit more of a kind of pale ale in a sense. But yeah, you certainly get, as I say, the sweet kind of, you get a little touch of that sweet caramel in there, you get some nice McVitie's digestive biscuity notes out of it, and then underneath you get the kind of wet white bready note from the Pilsner malt and the softer kind of white bready character underneath that. But at either end of that you do get a little bit of bread crust too. So the malty backbone of this beer is quite interesting. You can smell a few elements of the yeast in there as well, maybe giving like slightly woody undertones and stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting for sure. But yeah, malty wise, this one really comes across as quite like a pale ale, but it certainly has the yeastiness of some of these more kind of Czech lager beers. And I should explain that as well. For me, the main difference between a Czech lager beer and a German lager beer tends to be that the German ones are a bit more kind of crisp, if you like, whereas the Czech ones are a little bit more sort of soft and bready actually. So that's worth bearing in mind. So yeah, interesting stuff. This one, I think the aroma of this is quite nice. But let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer before we do the tasting then. So hoppy wise, I would say this beer, it's got a lovely kind of, it's got a little touch of earthiness to it, that's for sure. I think there is Czech Sats in this one because it's got that bright, slightly spicy floral note to it. But yeah, definitely a wee bit of earthiness in there. You do get a little bit of a herbal quality as well, and you get that nice, quite bright and still quite spicy floral aromaticity to it. So I suspect that this beer does have the Czech Sats in the base actually, but at the front of the nose you do get quite a nice zesty kind of grassy element of it as well. And again, that's an element that you would normally expect from the Czech Sats, but there's a lot of kind of tropical fruit to this one because of the Citra dry hopping. So remember, dry hopping, when you do that, that contributes just flavour and aroma. That's what you get out of the dry hopping, and that's why it's so popular. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things with this beer, for me, there's a lot of juicy mango in here. There's a lot of kind of soft apricot as well. And remember, Citra is an American hop, 14% alpha acid. It's known for its big mango notes, its kind of tropical fruit complexities, as well as having a little bit of a kind of, sort of zesty side to it as well. But for me, in this beer, it is contributing mainly, a kind of soft, juicy mango, a little bit of a kind of dried apricot in there as well. And you've also got a wee bit of you've also got a little bit of a you've also got a little bit of a kind of oily gooseberry kind of character in there as well. You can pick up the sort of a little bit of the kind of peary and sort of spicy apple notes that you would often associate with the with the Sats hop on its own, if you like. But yeah, it certainly has a wee bit more complexity to it. So fruity wise, yeah, mangoes, bit of dried apricot for me, a kind of oily peary note, a bit of gooseberry as well, and I think maybe a wee tiny hint of like lime or something like that. But it's a lovely smelling beer, this one, I have to say, although it does remind me a wee bit more of like a paleo, like a kind of session IPA or something like that. But we'll see how it comes across in the flavour, in fact. So I'm curious to see what this one has in store for us. But let's have a taste of this then. As I always say, though, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma before you get stuck into these beers. So yeah, this one is a 4.2% Italian style Pilsner beer from Benchwarmers Brewing Company in Helsingborg here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one and see how we go. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is interesting. Right. Yeah, Now what I'm going to say is, I think this beer is a nice, easy drinking beer, this one. But I'm going to say straight away, if I was to drink this blind without knowing what it was, I don't think I'd ever pick up that this was an Italian Pilsner, to be honest with you. It really is a little bit, it's got some of the, the malty side of it, yeah, you can get a bit of the kind of Pilsner crispness and things like that, but otherwise it's actually a lot more, I find this one is a lot more like a kind of pale ale or something, to be honest with you. It's it's got a lager mouthfeel, definitely, but the flavour wise, it is more of a kind of pale ale, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really thought, I thought this beer was going to be pretty much the same as the last Pilsner they did, but just with, some extra Citra dry hop in it and maybe a slightly higher IBU. But it seems that they've changed quite a bit in this one, to be honest with you. It does feel a little bit more like that. So yeah, I mean, it is unfiltered as well, so you've got to remember that. You do get unfiltered Pilsner beers, particularly in the Czech Republic. You'll get them. There's a really nice unfiltered version of Pilsner Urquell, of course, which I very much enjoy. But yeah, as we say, the way that everything goes together in this one, this is a very nice and very drinkable beer, and I like it. But as I say, it's just not quite what I expected in a sense. I thought it was going to be closer to the one that we had last month than it is, but it's changed quite a little bit actually. So that is worth bearing in mind with this beer. But I certainly do like it. It's a nice, tasty, sessionable beer, this one. So I'll say to them on that note, thumbs up to Benchwarmers. But if you're going to do an Italian sort of Pilsner, if you like, I think usually the Italian Pilsners are, I thought most of them tend to be, in my experience, more clear beers, if you like. I don't think they tend to take the unfiltered route with them, in my experience. Let me know about that in the comment section below. So this one has taken a wee bit of a different route to what we've had from other ones. We've also had, Italo Pils from Stockholm Brewing Company. That's probably one that you can compare this beer almost directly to. And their one was a bit more yeasty and farmhousey, actually. But to me, that's the kind of prerogative that you get from Stockholm Brewing. Their beers tend to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and farmhousey, actually. So yeah, I think the way this one goes about its business is quite is quite interesting. And as I say, I do like it, but it's not quite what I was expecting. And sometimes you get this when you're sitting down to review beers. But the question would be, would I drink it again? And like, yeah, I think I would. But if I had the choice of the other Pilsner or this one, probably I'd choose the other one. For when it comes to Pilsner, I like authenticity, definitely. But yeah, let's try and break the flavour of this beer down and just describe it for you a wee bit more succinctly. So straight away, across the middle of your palate then, you can feel that nice, smooth, kind of white bready character to this one. You can feel that just go right across the middle of your palate there. So on top of the kind of backbone of the soft white bread, you can feel there's a little bit of that more kind of wet white bready sort of thing that you're going to get from the Pilsner malt, and then and that kind of white bready base and more wet kind of white bready sort of thing, that goes across the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. But if you go to either end of the middle third of your palate, there is a nice bit of a bread crusty element to this one, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, I do like how that goes together in this one for sure. It has a nice the bready backbone in this one is quite nice. As I say, it's quite paleo-like in a sense. It is like a kind of paleo session IPA type quality that you get out of this one. It's got a wee bit of kind of zip and bite to it. But yeah, sitting on top of that kind of wetter bready quality that you get in the middle third of your palate, you can feel the more Pilsnery qualities coming out of the beer. So on top of that, you get that kind of circle there, and that's where the brown sugary side of the Pilsner malt comes out. So right in the dead centre, it's a wee bit more kind of concentrated, and then as you move out towards the edges of that middle third of your palate, it's certainly a little bit more kind of biscuity, and crisp, I would say. So I do like how that goes together in this beer. You do get a wee bit of that more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing and the crispness there. But what I would say is that on the back half of that middle third of your palate, you can feel the sort of drying elements of the kind of Pilsner malt in this beer. So if you go from the dead centre of your palate towards the back of that middle third of your tongue, you get a lot of these kind of more crisp, dry kind of Pilsner malty notes coming out of the beer, which I really like. So yeah, that side of the beer I think is quite nice actually, and I think underneath the front half of that middle third of your tongue there are one or two very slightly woody kind of things in there. So I really like how the middle third of your palate goes together in this one. As I say, a bit of a paleo character to it, but you know, the further you go into the aftertaste, you do start to get these more Pilsnery qualities out of the beer. So yeah, it does grow on me in terms of its Pilsner quality in a sense, but I still think there's quite a bit of paleo character in this one. I would stick with that. But yeah, let's go on to the back third of your palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate. Again, you get a wee bit of a bready build-up in there, a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty element. Then the base of that back third of your palate, as I say, you get the thicker kind of bready notes in there, you get the wetter white bread on top. You can feel a wee bit of the Pilsner kind of dryness creeping in there on the back as well. But then on top of that, you've got the kind of yeasty element to the beer as well, which is a more airy and slightly drier white bready character, I would say. So from the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel the flavour just condenses down a little bit. You can feel that flavour just condensing down a wee bit. Then as you push further forward into the middle third of your palate, the flavour just kind of squashes together a little bit more. So I do like how that goes together in this beer. Absolutely, the malty yeasty side of things I think works very well. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, so back corners of the palate, I think there is a really nice kind of earthiness to the beer. I think there's a really nice little bit of there's a really nice kind of big earthiness in this one, which is kind of interesting. But as you move further forward from that, you can feel it does quite quickly become quite spicy and floral, and I suspect that will be coming from, you know, the Czech Sats in here. But could there be a wee touch of like Columbus or Chinook or something in here as the bittering hop? I don't know. But yeah, the Citra, I think, you know, the Citra's been used as in the dry hopping stage, which isn't going to give you the more bittering qualities that you can get from Citra. So yeah, it's interesting because you do get quite an intense floral note with a bit of spiciness as you push further forward towards the front corners of the palate. Round the front curve of the tongue though, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy in a sense. So I do like how that pieces together in this one as well. The grassiness in this beer has a little bit of a lighter kind of zestiness to it as well, which is kind of interesting. But from the green perspective, it is quite nicely done. So on the front third of your palate then with this beer, and this is where all the fruity characters come out, it is quite nice again. So let's focus on that. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty grainy sort of thing, and then the base of that front third of your palate is definitely more it's definitely more of a kind of smooth white bready sort of thing with this one. But then on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer, and you can feel a little bit the influence of the sats in this one as well. The kind of satsy notes kind of sit underneath, but then you get the more citra notes sitting on top of that. So yeah, in the back of the front third of your tongue, I think you get a wee bit of a stronger passion fruit there, which will come from the citra. You get a bit of the mango, a more oily mango there, and then a wee bit of a drier apricot sitting underneath too. But you've also got a wee bit of a kind of, you do get a wee bit of a kind of citrusy note underneath too, which is quite interesting. But when you move into the front half of that, maybe you actually get a little bit of a kind of sultana type quality sitting underneath all of that tropical fruit as well there. So I'm pretty sure there's sats in this, and then the citra has been simply added as a dry hop, like they say. I think there is a bit of sats in this one as well. But yeah, I think sultana underneath, bit of passion fruit, and then on top of all that, you've got a bit of passion fruit at the back, a bit of mango in the middle, and then a wee bit of a dried apricot, as you move forward. But then as you go into the front half of that front third of your tongue, you can feel underneath you've got a wee bit of a more oily kind of peary character, maybe a wee bit of spicy apple towards the kind of front tip of the tongue, and then on top of that you're getting a few of the kind of gooseberry elements from the citra, and potentially a wee bit more of a kind of stronger lemon limey note out of it as you push towards the kind of front tip of your tongue, and that mixes with all the grassy esters of course. But yeah, I think that's what's going on the fruity side of this beer, and you do get, as I say, a little bit of the kind of floral spiciness just lingering further into the aftertaste with this beer, so that's interesting too. But yeah, I think that describes this one pretty nicely actually. I think that the way that this beer goes about its business is very, very nice in fact. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the tasting part of this beer. It's certainly a very nice beer, this one. As I say, not quite an authentic Italian Pilsner though, in my opinion at least. It has got a lot of paleo qualities to it, I would say. But yeah, on the mouthfeel side of things then, what could we say about this beer? So I would say that this beer, I would say that it's quite, I'd say that it's quite, sort of, I'd say that it's kind of, I would say that it kind of leans towards the top end of light body. The carbonation does have a degree of crispness in it, this one, but I would say that it's quite a wet and sort of slick lager beer actually, which is kind of interesting. As I say, this beer really does have a lager mouthfeel to it, but it's got a little bit more of a kind of, and it's got a lager mouthfeel and a sort of more pilsnery aftertaste to it. But I think a lot of the flavour really, to me, strikes me as more of kind of paleo-like, to be honest with you. But yeah, the malty side of this beer, as we say, is quite smooth. There's a bit of crispness in there. You've got a little bit of sweetness, and as we said earlier, you've also got a little bit of a kind of hoppy character to this beer as well, which is quite nice. So I think this beer, in terms of IBUs, I think it's probably about a 30 IBU beer, which is kind of interesting. But it's also, the 30 IBUs, I would say, so yeah, a nice little bit of hoppy bitterness there, smooth malt base in the backbone, a little bit of a sweetness and biscuity character too, a little bit of a crispness, and pardon me, and also you've got a nice kind of juicy but slightly oily fruity character to this one. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business, but as I say, in terms of authenticity, I wouldn't give this one the top marks for that. In terms of drinkability and things, I do like this beer. I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again, but if it was a choice of this one or the original Pilsner, I would pick the original Pilsner every day over this one. But yeah, I think maybe with this one, they maybe need to use that recipe, that original Pilsner recipe that they've got more closely, stick to that, and then just put the dry hopping in. Don't do anything else with it, because I think they have maybe done a few other things with this beer actually, but it hasn't. I think this one hasn't worked out quite as well as the Pilsner, the original Pilsner did. So just my opinion, but some people, you're free to disagree with that. Let me know your own thoughts in the comment section below. But this is a nice beer, but I don't think it's quite as well accomplished or rounded as the original Pilsner was actually. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. I think that's a fair assessment of this one. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Benchwarmers Brewing as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point very soon. This one was the Italian Pilsner, 4.2% ABV from Benchwarmers in Helsingborg here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange, skål, and cheers.